Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.
Would you listen to that underfoot? It's just crispy leaves, dried leaves. It sounds like the sort of photo walk that I take in the late autumn, going into early winter, when we have those cold, frosty mornings. There's been absolutely no rain, and it's as dry as. Actually, the commercial job I've been working on, photographing landscapers at work, and lots of it was to do with green grass. There is no green grass. Job on hold for at least a couple of months. I'm recording this start to the photo walk, this and the foreword to come in a moment, after the event, because I've already made my photo walk this week, which is a bit strange in some respects. Usually I do this bit as the sort of wind in, as it were, to the walk itself. It's my kind of warm-up, but this is post-event. But I still have to make, even though I'm 1 hour away, roughly, maybe more, from where I actually took my photo walk this week with my special guest, who I'll tell you about in a moment. I'm still going to make an opening photograph, which I always do. That starting frame, the one that sets you up for the walk. Let me make my sketchbook image, and I might as well make it of the completely leafy, barren walk that I'm making to record these words. X100V is with me today. Shutter speed 250th, f2.8. Why am I that wide? Let's go f5.6. Here we go. And the scrapbook image, just to set the scene. But the rest of the scenes, they will be from my photo walk that I took with my guest.
The foreword.
I'm blessed by the photo walk letters and comments that you so kindly send in. That advice, the inspiration, and the real life stuff that I read from the letters that you send, and of course so much as well from our conversations with guests. But I think today, and it's very early on in the chat you're about to hear, which I recorded on an actual photo walk with an actual photographer. What? You walked and talked with a real life person, Neil? That's a bit decadent in these times. Well, fortunately, not so much now. It's not that long ago, though, that it would have been illegal to have met somebody outside your bubble. I never want to have to work with those phrases again. Bubbles, bubble, and variant. Oh, I loathe the word variant now. My spell checker still refuses to recognize COVID, the word COVID, on my office machine, and I like that a lot. And I'm not about to teach it or unsquigglyfy it either. But anyway, yes, a real life conversation with a real life, not on the end of a Zoom call photographer, who has what I think what the cool kids would call a really good photographic life hack. So yes, I take lots of advice and snippets of I didn't know that, could do that, style golden nuggets of life experience from you and my guests. I noted down a couple of things that I've learned in the last 2 and a bit years now on this podcast from wildlife photographers, 2 in particular. George was one of them, George Logan, wasn't it? I'm sure it was George, who said, if a lion or cheetah attacks you, do not turn your back. You're better to stand up to it and roar back. I'm not quite sure I'd have it about my person to do so, but I hope that if that ever does happen to me in real life, that I'll remember those words from George. From a food photographer, to get a perfect small breakfast pancake, you'll like this one, if you don't remember it from last time round, put the mixture in a Tommy Ketchup squeezy plastic bottle and squirt it into the pan. Perfect small pancakes every single time. I just know you're going to try that one out. And from a surf and sports photographer, if you get caught in a riptide, now this was our Australian friend, wasn't it? I'm sure. maybe it wasn't. Anyway, if you get caught in a riptide, don't try to swim against it. Let it take you for a short while, obviously not too far, and then swim in a diagonal direction to shore. And that should help you. See? All important life lessons. But today, a photographic one that does two things. Number one, it proves that sometimes the daftest ideas are just the best. And number two, the fish counter insert name of your supermarket here, is actually a very good place to go for photographic lighting kit. Neil, have you lost it? No, seriously. Stay with me. All will be revealed. Today then, a storyteller and photojournalist called Kieran Doherty, a photographer who by his own admission flies well below the radar to tell his stories. He doesn't shout, and that goes for physically too. He's quietly spoken, he's generous, he's thoughtful, he's full of knowledge, he's sympathetic, he's empathic. We went for a walk at the start of this week on an expansive park and woodland which neighbours military training areas in a place called Farnborough. And somehow we ended up walking in the military no-go zone, just a little way in. I'm not quite sure how we ended up doing that, but that comes up in part two, which I'll talk about in a moment. It's I suppose very similar to the Photowalk of a month or so back when I went to Gloucestershire to spend time walking with the writer and the mentor and the photographer and the publisher and the senior lecturer and the writer and the podcaster, and I'm sure there's other things to his name. Grant Scott. It was just me and he and thee. No letters that week, and it's the same this week. It's an invitation for you and I to walk and listen to the photographer Kieran Doherty. And today the story starts. And then there's a part two to come. And the story is one of light and shade, really, because it starts with silly selfie admissions and how a photography job that should probably never have been really kick-started, it was. I mean, it was the reason behind Kieran's marriage. A sliding doors moment, if you will. We have the strangest cheap kit tip ever, being fired only to be rehired within hours by arguably one of the most important news agencies on this planet. How the worst natural disasters affect those who photograph them, and what happens when you do return to normality after seeing things like the devastation, the aftermath of the tsunami. Humanity and light from dark times, and also we talk about Wimbledon in a way that you've not seen the tennis mecca before. And there's a few memories atop that, including Kieran's time spent at a place called Wootton Bassett. So it is an episode of light and shade. But more than anything, this today is a moment to privately walk with a man who doesn't actually do this sort of thing, really. Apart from the fact that one of his mates is certainly one of the biggest podcasters on this planet. But we'll park that one, shall we? And that's the beauty, I think, of this Photowalk show, that I get to talk about your work often, and then we get to listen to those that have been at the coalface of life in a way both personally and photographically, that's a window to a world that we may never comprehend ourselves otherwise. I do feel, I'm going to use that word again, I do feel blessed to now know Kieran Doherty, and I'm hoping that over the next 90 minutes or a little bit more that you will too.
Today on the Photowalk.
Nothing prepares you. People come to you and say, with their papers and their passport, and they see this person in me and they go, can you help me? And they're the lowest moments, because you know there's nothing you can do. You know that you don't have it in your capacity to be able to help give these people the help that they need. And you feel guilty going in there.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today those stories come from Kieran Doherty, who upon realising in '93 that he needed really to think about how to make a living, he managed to gain a foothold into the intoxicating world of photojournalism, where he remained at the Reuters news agency as a specialist photographer for a number of years.
Usually, of course, the show is a jigsaw of your letters and my guests' thoughts, though today it's you, me, our walking shoes and time spent with Kieran. And a mention before this life lesson of a show in parts starts, and that mention is for the wonderful camera-enthused good people of mpb.com who support this show. If you buy, sell, or want to trade used camera kit, and if you live in America, the UK, or Europe, and haven't been to mpb.com yet, this is the website, and these are the people to trust. It doesn't really matter what kind of photography you're into either, street or social, or studio or macro, or touring, or action, or put in anything that you like photographing here in brackets, then mpb.com have kit that speaks to your camera bag and helps photographers like me and like you to tell our unique stories. Another great thing about mpb.com, they are part of the circular economy, and sustainability being more important than ever, this is one of the key reasons I am thrilled that they're here with us. You'll remember last year we were all excited about the annual MPB Hall of Fame, and now it's in its third year. That time is here once more, and until next Friday you have a chance to vote in it and win yourself a Fujifilm X100V camera just by voting for the kit that you think is worthy of being in MPB's Kit Hall of Fame 2022. Personally, the X100V will be in that for me, you know that, but there's plenty of other kit to be voted for. The Photo and Video Kit Hall of Fame celebrates the best photography and videography equipment of the digital age. Voting is now open to you, and you will decide which five pieces of kit to induct into the class of 2022. Each voter, that's you, that's me, will have the chance to win this amazing Fujifilm X100V mirrorless camera. I'll talk about it more on Monday, and you can read more and link to where to vote by visiting the show page today. So, shall we walk then? Checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldi's packed. Check. Boots on and laced. Check. Walking trousers or shorts. Check. Spare batteries. Check. Memory cards or spare film. Check. Earbuds in. Check. Lens caps off. So let's walk.
So the place we're walking at the moment, this used to be all military ground, did it?
Yes, as far as I know, it's in fact you still see the army training young recruits.
Oh, here?
Up here, yeah. Occasionally. I mean, you might suddenly spot a little platoon in the woods carrying out exercises. But yeah, essentially this was military ground. I mean, I hope my history is correct. But this sort of area to our right is a sort of a no-go area because I think the land's been closed off due to some form of poisoning, I think, in the earth.
When you say poisoning, what
Well, I mean, maybe it's from sort of military shrapnel or something like that. I think there is a reason, and I should know what it is. And I don't. We've always just thought we don't go in there. We always just walk round. But
so to our direct right here, this is the poisoned ground, which sounds like a movie, doesn't it?
You'll see. We can probably actually still walk in here just a little bit further to our right, but you'll see as we go further up that it's sort of gated off to a certain respect. But it's, I mean, dog walkers do let their dogs run down. There is a track. I mean, we don't go here. We'll go straight up this way. But
I see. So there's a gate there saying no entrance.
There's a gate there, and see the hill in the distance, the sort of brown patch, that sort of whole area in there. It's not a huge area in there, but it's sort of a no-go area.
It's probably full of old munitions and things.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. There's, I mean, here in Farnborough also you've got the ranges, which are near Purbright, and if you go running there, you just pick up shrapnel casings and stuff like that all over the place. They're all out there on military exercise.
Whenever I see a gate that says no entry, I feel compelled to want to go in. I would imagine as a journalist stroke photojournalist, you must have that very same feeling.
Like a red rag to a bull, isn't it? Absolutely. But yes, so you can just sort of start to see the ridge up there as to where we're sort of heading up. But this is called Caesar's Camp, and I'm not quite sure how it got its name, but I think it was misappropriated from the belief that it was a sort of a Roman camp back in the days of Caesar. But I think it's actually, originally it was an Iron Age fort. So it does have a sort of bit of history, this area.
But all these rocks and stones that are here, is that...
Yeah,
is that ancient history, or is that something to do with the military? That looks like military, doesn't it?
It does look a bit like military, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not aware that the Romans had concrete.
No, they were smart, but not that smart, you know.
Yeah.
But and it's more, and as you can see here, it's perfect. The undulation in the ground is perfect for military exercise. I mean, you can literally walk past a group and not see them. They're just in there very quietly, you know, a group of soldiers just doing whatever it is that they've been tasked.
That's making me feel like we're being watched, Kieran.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we see some today, we'll be lucky, but they keep themselves to themselves. And maybe if we get onto the ridge, occasionally you might see a group of them up there. I made the mistake once of seeing a group of them move, and I think they were doing some form of orienteering. And they moved to the edge of where we're about to go up to, and they were telling them about certain areas. And where they'd previously been 2 minutes earlier, I think one of them had left a bit of kit.
Right.
I can't remember what it was, but it might have been a knee pad or something that was attached to their backpack. So I picked it up and went back and handed it to the drill sergeant. Oh. And he said, that was one of my lot that left out there, did they? He said, right, somebody's in for 100 press-ups. I felt awful. So if you see any kit lying around, leave it.
Yeah, leave it. You're a prolific project photographer. But what about this kind of activity? Neither of us have taken our camera out of our bag yet, but photo walking for pleasure, is that something you do or don't?
It's probably something I didn't do until lockdown. And then I think what lockdown did to everybody was it forced them to rethink their situation. Yeah. So when the government announced that we were allowed to walk for an hour a day or something like that, exercise, yeah. So we started doing that, and I realized actually this is my only opportunity to actually see what's happening out here. So I bring the camera with me, and initially I just started photographing the family, whether my wife or my kids. I just started photographing them, and then that sort of turned into, it was a mission. Okay, definitely I'm going to, instead of let's go for a walk, it was like, well, I need to shoot some pictures, so I'll tell you what, we'll go for a walk and I'll bring my camera. And I just thought, let me see what lockdown is doing out in this area, and whatever it is, I'll start photographing it. And it was another excuse to I think that's what started me using film again. I mean, I haven't shot a digital frame in 2 years, so I've just been shooting film, literally.
The last 2 years?
The last 2 years, yeah. Oh. I've just been shooting film. And I think that whole process was very linear. You know, I started shooting my family, then I started shooting my parents whenever we were allowed round, and then I started developing my film in a film bag, and then I thought, no, this is ridiculous, I can't keep doing this. So then I built a darkroom. Yeah. And the darkroom is now a fully functioning darkroom with 3 of the best enlargers I could possibly get my hands on. And now it's and that's I've created that purely from what happened to us during lockdown.
Right.
And that's sort of taken me back to my darkroom days when I was a student.
Are you able to work commercially with film, or do people just not understand that process now?
No, not really. It's trying to convince, especially in a corporate situation, that film is something to do. They're not really interested. I wouldn't say they're not discerning enough, but everybody wants results instantly. You know, you spend a day shooting in a corporate situation, they want the results yesterday. So, actually shooting that way is with film is literally impossible, you know. And also they just see the expense involved.
Yeah.
And, but if I had an opportunity to do that and convince clients that this would be the way forward, I would grab it.
Are there clients out there, do you think? Having said that, maybe there's not enough discerning variety, are there, though? Is there anybody out there?
Certainly not in the corporate world. I don't think they'd understand what I was trying to say. Yeah. And also, there are certain, I would say 90% of the time, film just doesn't fit what it is that they want. you know, and you're not prepared to spend enough time on it anyway, so you may as well shoot it digitally. But yeah, so going back to the 2 years with not having shot a digital frame, I haven't, because COVID totally decimated my work. I did a lot of NGO work and corporate work, and all the clients, all the contacts I had, they all end up moving or losing their jobs. Everybody cut back, everybody started working from home. The whole situation was so fluid that everything just moved. Anything that I've earned in the last 2 years has purely come as a result of this latest story that I've been shooting, which started as a story on lockdown on my parents, has now turned into something else because it's going to keep going, and selling prints.
Well, we're going to talk about your parents' project in some detail in a short while, but I do wonder whether, can photography be a hobby, or are you always a professional, whether you're shooting something as a personal project or a passion project? Is it possible to have, I know some people say they're lucky to have their hobby as their profession, but I wonder if we ever think of it that way.
I certainly think of it that way more now than I did when I first started. But, you know, yes, I think it's almost an impossible question for me to answer that, because I'm probably so set in my ways and so biased about how I look at things that I probably couldn't discern. If I pull out my iPhone and start shooting something, does that make me less professional than if I pulled out my camera? And I go, no, it doesn't. Yeah. Absolutely, because there are moments when the iPhone, best camera is the one you've got in your hand, does the job.
Yeah.
So, and everybody is using an iPhone. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, but I feel as if I really can't answer it, to be honest.
Who makes the family pictures then? I know you've got the twins and you've got your daughter.
Yep.
And there's your wife. Now, I know in our family, Sam, my wife, is the photographer.
Right.
I am not.
Oh, no. I have 3 kids. They're 20 and 22 now.
Yeah.
They know how to use an iPhone. They know how to use a camera. I mean, they are snapping the whole time.
But as they grew up.
But as they grew up, absolutely, it was me. Yes,
that was it. Right.
Absolutely, totally. It was just, and in fact, any situation I found myself in, whether I was with my immediate family or extended family, it was like, yes, Kieran's here, it's fine. Kieran will take the pictures. Yeah. In fact, that goes for any situation I've mostly found myself in any social setting, is that, it's fine, we've got a photographer here, so we're sorted, and that's when I realise I have to figure out how to use the timed release on the camera that I've used for 5 years, and I suddenly realise I've never ever put the shutter or timed release on, and so I have to sit there and work that out. And they're looking at me like, do you not know how to do this?
Have you ever made a selfie? I'm not sure that counts, because you're running back in front of the camera with your guests, but selfie-wise...
I don't think I've never taken a selfie in my life. No. I absolutely hate having my pictures taken.
I did my first selfie, a celeb selfie, with... it's a couple of years ago now, and I haven't made one since, because it was such a disastrous moment, with Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber in a restaurant. I said to my wife, I have to go and get this picture. I've never done a selfie. And I went up to him and I said, Sir Andrew, I've never done a selfie. I'm a 50-year-old man, and you're my first selfie. And he was proper grumpy about it. And he only did it because his friends goaded him in. Brilliant. And I look back, I've got it on this phone that we're recording on at the moment, I must show you it. Right. But after we'd done it, I looked at it and I said, that's not a very smiley one, Sir Andrew. Could we do that one again? And he said, I think that's enough, and walked off. Right.
Oh, well, actually, now you come to mention it, I have had a selfie. I didn't take it myself, but it was after the Wimbledon final when Venus Williams won. Yeah. So, I mean, what a moment to be shooting centre court.
Yes.
And Venus Williams, and I adore Venus Williams. And this just so charismatic, so beautiful to watch play tennis. Just the epitome of what I thought tennis is about. And we were at the top of the BBC. I think we go onto the roof at the BBC Centre in Wimbledon, and we do this sort of the picture with the plate up there. And I'd said to a colleague of mine at the time, I said, listen, Adam, do me a favour. I'm going to stand here, and when Venus walks past at the end of the photo shoot, can you just take a picture so that I'm in the same frame as her? So he said, sure, no problem. So Venus walks past, Adam says, Venus, sorry, excuse me. He's been bugging me all day about this. Can he have his picture taken with you? And she said, sure, no problem. And we stood there, and there's a beaming picture of me and Venus standing there. And as much as it embarrassed me at the time, I'm glad he did it. Yeah. I'm glad he said, you know, Venus, can you come over?
You would never have asked otherwise.
I would never have asked to do that. And in those days, I don't think we were doing that with phones. I don't even know if that was possible, the old selfie.
I don't think so, no.
But yeah, so I lie. There is that one picture.
Did you see King Richard, the movie, with the Williams sisters?
No, I haven't.
Amazing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
You have to kind of remove the debacle from the award ceremony.
Oh, okay. Is that the Coen brother movie? Is it?
I don't know that, actually. I should know that. It's an extraordinary film, though.
Wow.
Blimey, this is a step up the route, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
I can see that there must be. Do they charge up this with backpacks on?
It's it's a little bit of a walk. This next section we're coming to here. We'll just keep on this, but it's worth it when you get to the top.
Yeah.
In fact, I came up here during lockdown, and on a really bright day, which I thought today might be, you can see London. And it's literally back there, and it's you can see the Shard. In fact, I photographed that.
The Shard from here.
Yes, absolutely. And
wow.
You can see the wheel. In fact, I think I did photograph it and stick it on Insta, but it's and I only had a 135 lens, so that was the longest lens I had. But the light had to be, you almost had to have a build up over 2 days of brightness, and then it would cut away that cloud and that gloom, and you saw. To see the wheel, the Millennium Wheel from here, and I think you're looking at around about 34, 35 miles. So. But it was nice, and it looked better on film than it did actually with the naked eye, because it's one of those things you can't actually stare at it directly. No. You almost have to look at it just out of the corner of your eye to see it properly, but once it's logged on film, then you can actually see it in its full majesty.
Of course, you'll see the Shard easily, won't you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But it's a really long, thin, it covers quite a bit of London, and you can see the Gherkin as well, right the way across, so from East London right the way across to Battersea.
The Shard is the greatest photograph I never got, in that we were coming in on a flight into Heathrow, and we were cutting through this low mist, and out of the top of the low mist, it was an evening, the Shard was poking through all this beautiful light, and we were all strapped in with the seatbelt signs on. My camera was in the overhead locker.
Oh no. That's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always the way. I remember doing that flying into Nepal with Mount Everest.
Oh,
exactly the same.
You trumped me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, but you have.
Well, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's climb this. Oh, somebody's left a picnic blanket there. There we go. So right in front of us is the famous Farnborough. And I'd forgotten Farnborough Air Show was on last week when I initially contacted you. They said, let's meet on Wednesday. He said, can't do that. Farnborough's on.
I was under the mistaken belief that the jets would interrupt, but I realised that actually the show was...
we were recording
It's been whittled down so much over the last couple of years that we probably wouldn't have had a problem at all.
No. But your wife works there, doesn't she?
She does, yeah. She works down at the Farnborough Airport, works in the terminal. She also does the customer service work as well, Dennis. She sort of does two jobs, but she's basically taking all the rich and famous, escorting them from the planes and seeing them through the terminal and out, making sure their path is as smooth as possible,
Not so many oligarchs these days, I would assume.
Not so many oligarchs these days, but definitely politicians, actors, all that lot, they're... It's quite a busy airport. I think they've just won the #1 European airport for the 10th time in a row or something like that.
The #1 European airport, the likes of you and I are not likely to ever fly into or experience.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I have flown out bizarrely once for a job. We were working, we had to go up to Morecambe to photograph the big submarine that BAE Systems were building.
In Morecambe?
Sorry, is it Morecambe or is it?
No, not sleepy Morecambe, surely. Not in the lakes.
Right. Oh no. Gosh, do you know what? One of my son's friends.
Is this a quiz?
Yeah, I can't. But anyway, they were building a huge nuclear submarine up on the west coast.
Yeah.
And BAE Systems, they have 2 jets that fly from here.
Oh.
And so twice a day. And so the BAE put the press, only I think it was 5 or 6 of us on a plane, and we actually did get to fly out. I mean, we weren't travelling in any luxury or anything like that.
I was going to say, did you have the reclining seats and the champagne service?
We did have sandwiches. There was a tray at the back that we were asked to pass around, but yes, so I got to fly in and fly out of Farnborough once. So another box ticked.
Yeah. You met your wife though through air travel, didn't you?
I did. When I was just starting out in London, a very good friend of mine and I were, hustling as you do in London, trying to get work. And he had a connection with an agent who had a connection with Gulf Air, the airline. Yeah. And they wanted their whole corporate brochure shooting in about a month's time. But we had no corporate brochures that we could show them because, we didn't in those days. There was nothing like that. So we drove around all the top hotels in London and we went into the Dorchester and just asked for the corporate brochure. Took the corporate brochure, checked if it was assigned to anybody, and sent these off to the agent. Said, "Yeah, we did these." And the agent sent them off to Gulf Air, and Gulf Air said, "Yep, these 2 have got the gig." So we flew out to.
That was cheeky.
That was very cheeky. So, so bearing in mind we had to use medium format. Yeah. We were using medium format cameras. We'd never used medium format before, and we were shooting on transparency. And they grounded, I think, a 747 for 10 days for us to do the shoot.
Right.
And that involved first class stewards, stewardesses, eating, economy class, pilots, and also Gulf Air as a company based in Bahrain. And so the knock-on effect of grounding a 747 was that 20 or 30 stewardesses didn't work for 10 days. And I happened to know one of them, and I went and met her on the first night we arrived in Bahrain, because we wanted to get out of the awful accommodation that we've been put in. And I think, to be honest, Gulf Air saw these 2 likely lads turn up and going, "Are you seriously telling me these 2 are coming to shoot our corporate brochure?"
And we've downed a jet for we brought a jet down for.
Well, I'll never forget standing on the runway, and I was directing where I wanted it to be.
Well, the 747.
Yeah,
right.
So they were parking it exactly because I was working out the sun was going to come up there in the morning. Yeah. But yes, we had everything with us: the lights, the equipment, the what's the thing you get on it and it goes up?
Like cherry picker,
like a platform picker. Yeah. We were doing tests, so we were doing Polaroid tests. Yeah. So we'd take the camera and we'd look through it and we'd do the Polaroid test, and the Polaroid test kept coming out blank, and we couldn't figure it out because we were in bright sunlight and everything was correct, and the test kept coming out white. And they were all looking at us going, "Okay, are we ready to sort of take the shots now?" So we had to thinking, what are we doing? Every test we're doing is coming out white. There's something wrong with the camera. And we thought we'd taken a broken camera out with us. In the end, we just put the transparency back on and just started shooting.
Without knowing whether it was actually going to...
Without knowing. And unfortunately, we bracketed. Yeah. And then we decided, after 10 rolls, okay, let's get these developed. So we got them developed and they came back, and actually it was working. We still have not to this day ever figured out what was the problem with the camera. But back to meeting my wife, yes, Tia was one of the stewardesses that was sort of taken off work for 10 days. And that's how I met her at one of these parties we went to one evening. And so if we hadn't taken the Dorchester's corporate brochure and lied through our back teeth and gone and got this gig, I'd never have met my wife. So I don't have any regrets.
Did she know at the time? Did you say, "I must tell you a slight secret here. I have no idea of what I'm doing"?
We probably did, and I think actually they could probably tell that we didn't have a clue, because we would sort of debrief at the end of every night in front of 10 stewardesses, and sort of say, "Oh, we got that, and we did this, and we did that," and but in the end, we got the brochure done, and then they tried to not pay us.
Oh.
And then they kept our passports, and they said, "No, we're," and we couldn't understand why, but I think they thought they were being taken for a ride, and essentially they were, but actually they weren't, because when you look at the final brochure, it looked amazing. I mean, we were able to produce a beautiful looking brochure for them. Yeah. And I learned so much about lighting that Simon took the majority of the shooting and I did all the lighting. Yeah. And we were just I took a gold salmon card. You know this gold card you get in salmon? You know, sort of smoked salmon you buy in the supermarket.
Oh, the backing card underneath the fish.
Absolutely, that. So I took 2 of those out with me because we knew that part of the world, they love the gold sort of light in those pictures. So I took one of those salmon cards out with me and basically used to bounce light coming in through the aircraft window, back off the salmon card onto say they were pouring the tea in first class, so I would be bouncing it on the stewardess's face and onto the metal, and there would be this moving golden light going around. At the same time, our lights, I'd taken a headrest from the aircraft which was pink, it was their colour, and I put the headrest over the bulb, so the bulb was hitting purple light into a gold brolly and pumping that back in to balance the green light that was coming in through the aircraft. At the same time, hiding under the seat using the gold card. We did it.
Did the clients watch this salmon card
they were
being used?
Yeah, there was an art director there who was supposed to... He did nothing. Yeah. And actually, to be honest, we didn't want to be involved with the art director, but... I think it might have been him that tried to stitch us up at the end. He may have seen the way we were working. But I mean, it was really Heath Robinson. But we both came away from it when we saw the final product, and they spent money putting it together with all the embossed gold, and it looked beautiful. But I do think that they thought these guys are far too young and far too inexperienced, and we actually can't quite believe they've pulled it off.
That's the wonderful, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, and that sort of directed my initial career in broadcasting, the wonderful naivety of I can do anything youth. We don't forget, but we sort of park a little bit as we get on in life and think, I can't do that doesn't make sense.
Well, funnily enough, I was just asked this weekend by an aviation company to do a total interior and exterior shoot of their latest jet. It was flying into Farnborough for 12 hours. And my name had been recommended to them, and I actually had to send an email back and say, look, I've done this 30 years ago, but I need all this kit, I need a crew, I need all the power, I'm doing it at night in a hangar. I said, look, and on top of which I use really old, well, not really, I use digital Leicas with 50-year-old lenses. My widest lens is 28mm. I need, tilt shift lenses to be able to do this properly. I need pocket wizards. I need the works in order for you to be able to say, this is the aircraft that we're going to lease out to people. So I had to send an email back saying, look, I can't do it. You need a specialist who's got the kit, who can come in and do this. And they were really taken aback by the honesty. And they ended up saying, look, thanks for your honesty, because I think they were just expecting me to go, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah. And I would have gone in, and the worst thing you could do is go into that situation and produce a mediocre set of images for an aviation company who are probably going to pay you maybe £5,000 or £6,000 to shoot that. And they came back and they said, what we have done is looked at your website and seen the style of images you do. We'd much rather use you in our lifestyle and travel section for the airline.
Which is right up your street.
Totally. Yeah. So you think I'm losing out on an awful lot of money here, but I am not equipped now to be able to do this job. So just tell them, and everyone's a winner in the end,
You know what you need? If I may give you some advice, you need a salmon card.
Yeah. I'd have needed a few salmon cards, to do one of those, because it's a very set of images that aircraft have internally, but everything needs to be lit, and nobody realizes that no matter where you are in the world and what aircraft you're shooting, there's only one light source. And these have to look like there are 10 light sources in order for them to be able to sell it to their clients, So rather than do a mediocre job or even a bad job, I decided to come clean, and it may work out for me in the end.
The show seems to have a half-hour introduction, and I've been acutely aware of that. And in fact, in a recent meeting, we have this Patreon support as how we fund part of the podcast. And in a recent meeting, Kieran, I was saying, is the show a little bit too long at the start? It seems to take a long way before we get to a guest. Everybody said, no, that's nice. We've done the same today. I'm looking down my list of questions, and I haven't reached really a photographic. We've talked about your wife, we've talked about stepping on bullets, and now I want to talk about your camera. So it's loosely photographic. Your camera's in a terrible, shabby state.
It is.
Look at it.
Absolutely.
How do you even get a picture out of that?
Yeah. Well, that's, I've never been a gear man.
No.
But that doesn't mean I don't look after them. But yes, I'm not. As you can see from the state of my 35mm lens, it's definitely been around. But
it doesn't quite look like the camera that took a bullet for Don McCullin, but it's not far from it.
No, the lens certainly isn't. But I've got two of these M6s and an old M4 II that I use, and I sort of rotate them on a basis. And if you think this looks bad, you should see the M4 II. It's absolutely knackered. And to be fair, I did try during lockdown to send them away to get serviced, and I was going to send two of them away, and then what? But the company up north that specialise in Leicas, apart from Leica, there's one company that have a very good reputation for servicing. They were so busy, and they're dealing with Leicas coming from all over the world, that it was just impossible. So I went onto YouTube, and there's some German engineer on YouTube who videos himself taking Leicas apart, and so I just watched his. And I took my M4 II apart, and I serviced the shutter, and I gave it a clean and a lubrication, and then I put it all back together, and I just got to the last bit where there's a shutter release. Again, problems with shutter releases, the timer on the old cameras, that if you don't get that absolutely perfect, you can't use it. And I don't use it, but I could not bear it not being on the camera, not working. So I spent 2 days trying to get that piece back together, and I did eventually. And so I just thought I'd probably save myself £500 or £600.
Yeah.
But I can assure you, all three cameras need to go away and be looked at. In fact,
I've changed my oil in a car from a YouTube video. I would never take a Leica apart.
No, well, actually, it was only. But when you see how this engineer did it, I even bought the mat, and I bought the tools and the screwdrivers. Yeah. And he did everything so methodically, laid everything out in an order that it went back the same way. That it was a huge achievement for me to think, gosh, and the camera still, and the shutter problem is now gone. I had a lot of banding going across my across the images, and that's now gone. But I tend to do that. Leica once, so I use a Q and an M240 and an SL, the digital Leica, and I got back from Liberia on an assignment, and I sent the camera back to Leica, and their engineers took the camera apart, and they just said, what on earth? We've never seen a camera in this state. And they just took the whole thing apart, cleaned everything, fixed it, put it, I think the electrics had seized or something like that, and put it back together.
Is there a slight pride in that as well? Do you quite like that concept that you've topped the list of photographers that have sent them cameras that have never looked quite so bad?
Yes, I am very aware of pushing everything I have, every bit of kit, every bit of equipment to the limits. And I don't mean physically to the limits, I mean what it can do for me.
Yeah.
So even if I'm using this is an f2 lens on here, I'm really trying to get it to shoot at 1.4. And so either I'm pushing the lens or I'm pushing the film to the absolute maximum. Because sometimes the results just don't work. But a lot of the time I find is if I'm pushing it, I end up getting what I want.
Do you think of digital in the same way?
No, not at all. I find digital, I started using digital in 1998 when I was sent to the Caribbean to do the England-West Indies cricket tour. Yeah. And I used that huge Kodak 1 megapixel camera, and I took that for the whole tour. And it changed as a photojournalist working for an agency. It completely changed the way we work, because in the time I'd be bringing a dev kit with me and film, and we'd be doing all that. To go to the West Indies and all the sun and the sand and not have to dev film, and we just had those huge discs that were the size of credit cards that used to go into the bottom of the camera. It totally changed the way we worked. But when the cameras started getting better and the resolution started getting much better, and it didn't take long, it was 2 or 3 years, and we were using the Canon EOS system, I found great to be able to work, but eventually I found digital became too good. It too clean, too surgical, and I didn't like the way images looked on digital. And it's only when you shoot film that you realise actually film's never really sharp. But it's that softness that it is sharp, but there's that softness that film has, that the emulsion has, and obviously because of all the different layers that digital couldn't and never will have. And so great as a way of functioning as a photographer. It would have been very difficult to do the job I did back in the 2000s if it wasn't using digital. But even now, the Leica cameras, so I was sent 2 cues before they were brought out on the sort of hush-hush. A contact there sent me, he said, try these out. I'm not sure what you think. It might be a bit gimmicky. I absolutely loved it. It had AF, and I just thought it's a game changer for Leica because they've now opened themselves up to another market that was never open to them before. And I loved the Q, but the first camera I had was the M9, and the CCD sensor on that was beautiful. And that's never been replicated. I still have my M9.
Oh, really?
In all the other sensors, they've now gone to I think the CMOS sensor. But the CCD had that palette, the color palette it had was completely different to any other sensor that they've got now in their cameras.
See, I had the M8. Which I thought of was appalling because that wasn't full frame, and it had all sorts of fringing issues. So the M9 that became.
The M9 was. I mean, I'd never used a digital Leica before, and they approached me when I was shooting the Wootton Bassett story.
Oh, right.
Because they saw that I was shooting this story, and I was shooting on film, and they said, "Would you like to, try the M9 or whatever to see how you get on with this?" And they sent me the camera, and I must admit, I absolutely loathed it. I couldn't figure it out, and I just thought, hang on a second, it's just aperture and speed. And everything was overexposed, everything was wrong, it just looked awful. And I was on the point of sending it back when I just thought, you know what, all I'm going to do is put it around my neck, and whatever I'm doing, if I'm in the house, if I'm cooking, if I'm out, if I'm playing cricket, if I'm playing football, I'm just going to take it with me. It's going to be with me everywhere, and I'm going to photograph the most bizarre, inane objects, and I'm going to see if I can get this camera to work. And something happened. And eventually I realized, okay, now I understand how this camera works. What the difference was between when I first got it and understanding it, I couldn't tell you, but something just clicked. And I suddenly realized and saw the potential of that sensor. And then that was it for me. It was just an absolutely stunning camera.
But you still love your film, and I was looking through your stories the other night, and I note that you like to use completely out-of-date film, HP3. You told me a glorious story about where were you? You were in, was it? No, it was India with your family.
Yes.
When you bought up a film stock you've never been able to find since then, and people seem to gift you stuff that's no longer your fridge actually is full of stock that is no longer available.
Full of stock that's no longer available.
Your house was on fire. I would imagine you'd be in obviously after the family you'd rescue the fridge, wouldn't you?
But fortunately the fridge is not in the house. It's at the end of the garden, so it would probably be fine. But yeah, it was, I mean, that was a cost thing really through COVID. I just thought, what's the cheapest way to be able to shoot film? Because black and white film is so expensive. I mean, £7, £8, £9, £10 a roll. It's unbelievable. So I started looking at expired film, and then I realised, gosh, there's a market on eBay where people realise expired film, it's almost just as expensive.
Oh, no.
So, you know what I mean? And so you'd be looking at one roll of Fuji Nearpan, which would be £11.
Yeah.
I can't afford £11 for 36 shots. Bearing in mind, I'm just getting back into film, and I would probably get the dev wrong and all that stuff. But I just started, if you search and you look, you can find the right stuff. Yeah. And I've had people local who used to have dark rooms who have worked out that I have a dark room, and they just come and I find things dropped at the door. So there's a carload of...
Like small gifts,
but it's like, the old print dryers that you used to have back in the day, do 16, 12. I'll show you. I mean, that was just literally a present, as was loads of expired film. And of course, if you've got the confidence to use the expired film, I mean, the confidence is going into a certain situation and seeing a moment and going, okay, I'm going to commit to using this film in here now when this is happening. So I don't know, imagine an image of my father getting his first COVID jab. You're not going to get a second shot at that. No. So you have to commit, and you think, whatever I'm going to do, I'm now going to commit to using this 25-year-old out-of-date film. And you do it, and you look at it, and the results were okay. They weren't perfect, but there's an image there that I can quite happily use or publish. I think it might have might have been published that image.
Well, no such thing as the perfect shot, just the perfect moment.
Yeah,
is a famous phrase, isn't it?
Completely. And I think if you don't have that moment, then there's no point in actually taking that picture. So I just found the film and the cameras, I just thought, that they are a sort of a means to an end. And as long as I can get that moment, I don't actually mind what I use in getting it. But these Leicas, they're just the smallest, most inoffensive. And I've been using these since 1990.
Yeah.
In fact,
it's the same size, isn't it? This is named 6, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's pretty much the same size as the F1 as the X100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is...
No wonder people mistake these. I need to obviously batter mine a bit more.
Yes, I think you need to get
It looks far too new.
Yeah, it does, yeah. We can drag it a link.
Let's drag it. But talking of gifts, and we're going to come back in a moment and we're going to talk about your photography. It's been far too long as a huge warm-up act. But the greatest gift you ever received was this enlarger. You tell the story, because I'm going to make a real hog's ear of it.
So I've built the darkroom during COVID to process the film, and I have a lovely DeVere 5.4 enlarger in there and a Lights Focomat 35mm enlarger in there. And a friend of mine who I've known since I was a kid, she contacted me and she said, "Kieran, look, I've just inherited my parents' house and there's a load of camera equipment here. I have no idea if anything's any use to you at all. Do you want to come over and have a look?" And as it was, Raquel's father, Dennis, was the first man who gave me my break in photography. And while I was at college, he gave me my train fare every weekend to come down to Hindhead.
Wow. And
he was in charge of the Southern News Service. He was a journalist, a very well-known journalist on Fleet Street at the time, and he put me into the darkroom with his 3 other photographers, and he threw me in at the deep end. So much so that after 3 weekends there, I'd only just started my NCTJ in Sheffield, doing the photojournalism course. I didn't want to go back to the course, but my parents had paid the fees, so I felt obliged to go back, and grudgingly I did go back, but I'd come down at Christmas, every other weekend, then at Easter, and then I thought maybe I'll get a job in the summer. So there I learned how to dev film, how to scan film. We used to print, put it onto drum rolls, scan it, drive film up to the Daily Mirror. All this sort of, you're learning all this stuff at 2021, and this is how Fleet Street operates. It was intoxicating in that sort of environment. And in there was this enlarger that we would use. There were 2 enlargers in there, one colour head, one black and white head. And it's an old Lights Focomat 1A, which is the sort of, it always reminds me of the creature from Alien. It's got the sort of long head, that sort of beautiful looking piece of kit. And so I went round to Raquel, actually the first time, and there wasn't really much. And then the second time she said, "Oh, and there's this." And it was all in bubble wrap. And as I opened it, I thought, I can't believe this can't be the same enlarger. And she said, "Yes, it's the enlarger that was in the darkroom." And she said, "My father actually gave it to my brother as a present for helping pack up when the business stopped. Raquel's brother Paul helped Dennis pack everything up, and as a thank you, he packed it up. And I think Dennis even trailed it. I think Paul might have been living in Argentina, and he took it out to Argentina to give to him as a gift, because Paul was into photography as well. Anyway, it was lying there in this bubble wrap, hadn't been touched. And I said, I learned how to print on this enlarger.
Very machine.
And Raquel just said, "This was meant for you."
Yeah.
She said, this is serendipity, karma, whatever it is. She said, and she was thrilled that the enlarger was now going to a good home. And like I said, I got straight back, set it up, bulb still worked, and I just knocked out a print there and then and said to her, "It's in the darkroom now, and look, I've just printed this from it." And it was, and it was beautiful. And they're all 3 different types of enlargers. So yes, there was some, I don't know what the word is, but the idea that enlarger 30 years later is now sitting in my darkroom as a gift from the family is it's beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's about time we talked about your photography. Well, we kind of have, haven't we, really, as we've been going along. But I want to go back to 1993. In 1993, I was playing records by Bananarama on the radio, but you decided to do something altogether far more worthy. Not that there's anything wrong with Bananarama on the radio, clearly, but you went into photojournalism. What were those first tentative steps like? I mean, this is pre-digital. This is still sort of on the, not quite the coattails, but it's heading toward that sort of the end of what a lot of photojournalists, including people like dear Tom Stoddart, the late Tom Stoddart, say was the golden era. And you were still in it.
Yes, I mean, very, very lucky to have just come in at the end of that. And of course, you know, the important thing about that is to have those guys like Tom and, you know, Max Nash and all the other older photographers. You just could not get any more experience than listening and being around those guys. So to have had that and then sort of taken that in. But to be honest, you know, I sometimes wonder I left college, I left the NCTJ, and you're supposed to get a job on a local newspaper. That's the route, provincial. Then you maybe move to a national. And I wasn't interested. I mean, you know, by this time I think I was 23, 24, and I thought, right, okay, I'm heading straight down to London. And so I headed straight down to London, and I did that thing where you just literally walk around all the haunts where you would see press photographers. Yeah. Most of them meant the High Court, and I met some great photographers, Phil Coburn and Louis Hollingsby and Paul Grover. These guys, they sort of took me under their wing, and they sort of said, listen, okay, this is how you earn money. We come here, something happens at the court, you photograph it, you ring someone up and you go, I think you need this picture. Yeah. But to be honest, I didn't really know that style of photography existed. When I decided that I wanted to be a photographer, I was sort of worked out that I wasn't good enough to be a painter.
Because you were going to be an artist.
Yeah, and you know, and I still paint and do all that stuff now. But I had a sort of an epiphany when I saw very good friends of mine's work, and I just went, okay, this is just out of my league. I'm going to use the camera as my tool to express myself, and so I didn't realise there was this world of photojournalism. Yeah. I just thought, you know, I'm just going to go and I'm going to take these beautiful pictures, and people are going to buy them off me, and they're going to put them on their wall, and it's just, everything's just going to be hunky-dory. And so I sort of, I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been in some sort of coma at the time, but I didn't realise that there was this existence of photojournalism. I was looking at books by Salgado at the time, you know, who travelled the world and did all these incredible black and white.
Very formative days then.
Yeah, absolutely, you know. And then I discovered, you know, again through Simon, who I mentioned earlier, he was very integral in getting me into that sort of line of work. And then I realised this is just unbelievable that you could go somewhere, take a photograph, you know, fight with other photographers to get that picture, and then, you know, you take it into the Reuters desk and they would go, yes, we'll give you £75 for that. Yeah. And you go, so if I come in again with another negative, do I get another £75? And they went, well, technically, yes. And they soon cottoned on, okay, you know, as I was in 4 or 5 times a day. Like, no. What we're going to do is we'll put you on shift.
Right.
So they put you on shift. It means then they can send you as many jobs as you like, but they're only paying you a set amount. And of course I started doing that for Reuters, and my sort of career ended before it had begun, because within, I think, 2 months at Reuters, they fired me because they just thought I wasn't any good. And you know what? They were absolutely right. But I remember sitting in the car, Simon came down. Simon plays a big part in my career. Simon came down anyway, Kieran, I don't know how to tell you this, but listen, there's no more gigs at Reuters for you because technically they don't really think you're up to it. He said, I think they're wrong, but he said, they don't think you're up to it. And I went, oh, okay. So that's that door shut. But I didn't know how big Reuters was. So, do you know, it wasn't a massive disappointment. I just thought, okay, they're just another company. I'll go and find someone else. I'll maybe go to AP or AFP or something like that. Sitting in the car, driving home, thinking, okay, what am I going to do here? Reuters was quite good because they paid the most. That was the sad thing. Anyway, Simon gets a phone call. The IRA have mortared Heathrow, the runway. So, Simon, you need to get there ASAP. And he said to me, do you want to come with me? Because I haven't got time to drive to South London to drop me off at home. I went, yeah, fine, I'll come with you. Both drove to Heathrow, got out. Both of us shot pictures. In those days, it was Simon, come back to the office. There's no digital. It's like, get your film back. Yeah. So he drove back and I gave him my film, and the office said, we'll need to send another photographer out to cover you. And he went, it's all right, Kieran's with me. And they were like, Oh, really? Okay. Well, all right, leave him there. Just get back as quickly as possible and then get back out there. So he did, and he came back. And in the time he'd been away, the pool the pool system had arrived. I don't even know what the pool system is. Yep. Yeah. So basically, they said, right, 2 photographers, and the pool system works where whoever's in charge of the situation, the police go, right, 2 photographers. Yeah. You're going to go in, one from an agency, one from a paper, and you're going to go in and you're going to photograph the mortars sticking out of the back of the car.
And everybody else is waiting outside.
And everyone else is waiting outside. So me, this unknown, is sent in because I'm Reuters. We were picked, so I had to go in and do this pool.
But they didn't know you weren't Reuters.
No, they didn't know that. You
were and weren't.
Absolutely, I'd been fired. Yeah. So I walked in, and I remember I was with Tony Harris, great photographer that worked for PA, and his son Chris Harris used to work for the Times. And Tony Harris looked at me, and he obviously saw I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So he said, "Listen, son, stick with me." He said, "Just point your camera in the same direction I point mine." He said, "Just get your flash on manual, and we will just sit there." Now they took us to this dark car park in Heathrow, and you couldn't see a thing. And they said, the car's over there somewhere. And there were about 30 cars in this car park. And I said to Tony, I can't see it. What am I going to photograph? And he said, just photograph everything. So we picked up our cameras and we just blasted
bang.
everywhere like this, like that. And then they said, right, thanks, pull over. Finished, walked back, everyone's looking at me going, who's this guy doing the pool? Never seen him before. So Simon comes back, having dropped off the film. He said, you got a nice frame from when we first got here. And I said, oh really? He said, yeah, he said, you got this picture of this policeman holding a rifle, and there's a police van streaking past it, and there's Concorde taken off in the background. And I said, oh no, that's not the plane, that's the model. Because in those days...
Oh, it had it out the front of Heathrow, didn't it?
That airport, and it used to be Concorde.
Yes.
So I've got Concorde, British policeman, and van streaking past. And they've gone, that's gone out on... that's gone straight out on the wire. They asked me, Simon said, if it was my picture. I said, no, that's Kieran's. Yeah. So it's gone. He said, what have you got here? I said, I've got the pool. I said, I've got a picture of apparently these mortars or rocket, whatever, coming out the back of this car. So we headed back to London, got back to the ITN building, because we were on the 5th floor at the ITN building at the time. And the boss, or I'd say that the guy in charge of the desk, you walk along that atrium, and he was at the end, and he'd opened the door and he saw me coming. Now he knew it was time critical, everything, because we were talking really late at night here. Yeah. So door opens, Mark stands there, and he has his hand out like this, and I've pushed the rewind button on my camera, and I see him put his hand out like this, and I sort of slightly panic, and I sort of make this jerky movement that opens the back of my camera.
Oh no!
And I just see the film whizzing back. And I shut it, and as I've locked eyes on him, shut it, he hasn't looked down, and I'm thinking, you haven't seen that happen. So I close the camera. Mark says, I'll take the film, Dev. I said, no, you're fine, I'll do it. It's fine, I'll go and do it, no problem, because I didn't want him.
No.
Got in, put it into the machine, the longest 12 minutes of my life. And I got to the machine, out came the film, and I could see that I probably shot about 20 rolls, and 10 of them were just 20 shots. Yeah. Sorry, 20 shots. 10 of them were completely fogged. I got out and put it onto the loop and went, and he was like, no, I'll look at that, thanks very much. So I cut off the fogged bit, and he said to me, you only shot 10 frames. I was like, yeah, it was, this manual flash, you'd only get whatever. Anyway, so he goes through it like this, and I'm sitting there going, and he goes, that'll do. And he finds one frame, and there's a picture, you can just see these 2 metal pipes coming out of the back of a car. He said, that'll do. And as he said that, in came the front pages with policemen on the front. And then by the time we left that evening, on the front was the pool picture that I'd shot. So they'd moved the front page with the policeman to page 2, and then they'd given me the front page, all of them, with the mortar.
They were all your shots?
All mine. And so as I was leaving that night, Mark said to me, he said, I think that might be worth a few shifts. And that was it. And then I was back on, and I just thought, I can't believe it. The last 5 hours, I've lost my job, and I've been through this unbelievable situation, and having got my fronts again, blown it again by fogging the film, but then fortunately getting out of it. And I just thought, right, that's a sign. And it told me that, you get one opportunity, and that was my opportunity. And I thought, right, I'm never letting this go again. And it's incredible what you learn from that whole situation. You just think, I never, ever, ever want to be in a situation like that again, on something as critical to your career. You know, no one had died or anything like that, but you know, as a moment in your career, you just go, right, okay. And if I hadn't experienced that so early on, it was such a shock to the system that I may have gone off on a slightly different tangent, or I may not have been disciplined enough, or you know, who knows. But I feel only good came out of that for me.
When the Ukraine war started, there was an interesting article about the very well-established, very well-known photographers of past conflicts who decided they needed to be there. I think Patrick Chauvel was the one who suggested, you know, he needed to be there instead of tending to his roses in the garden. And you've been in these situations. You've been to Iraq. You've been in war and conflict zones. What is the draw for a photojournalist?
Well, I mean, in my case, it was not that I necessarily wanted to go to the Iraq War, and I certainly wasn't forced to go. When Royce photographers, we're all given an option, and no one's expected to go to these. But I just felt I had to do something, and I never wanted to be. There were a lot of photographers at Royce that are far braver than me that want to go into the front line stuff, and they embed, and you know, they're being shot at and all this sort of stuff. I've got 3 small kids, and I thought, really, it's not really me that, but I'd rather go in unilaterally afterwards and maybe tell the story of. Everybody forgets what happens afterwards, so that's really what I felt. I wouldn't be able to tell any form of story by doing that. I mean, Royce had some incredible photographers that Goran Tomasevich and the photographers like this that just shot unbelievable imagery in war zones. And it wasn't that you would ever try and compete with that. You couldn't. It was just, Goran is a very special photographer when it comes to shooting stuff like that. But that just wasn't me. And so, you know, I remember I was very against the Iraq War. I was very against the fact that Britain had got involved. It had actually caused a big argument between me and my dad at the time, because he thought that, yes, we should get involved. And I just thought, no, there are no weapons of mass destruction out there. What are we doing? But of course, then, you know, I went to, I wouldn't say I had an amazing, photographically, you suddenly realize, yeah, this is why I'm a photographer. This is why I'm a photojournalist. I want to be here and I want to tell these stories, but I wasn't looking for the shooting and the sort of death images. I was looking for the life and the little moments of hope that you can find in these situations. And you know, you need to spend an awful long time in these places and an awful long time with people really to start finding those. So when you're parachuted in as an agency photographer, sometimes time's against you, and you have all these thoughts and these things battling inside your head about what you want to do, and then the reality of the situation when you hit the ground is so completely different that you can come away very disappointed with how it went, or, you know, and the amount of time that you would invest in trying to do things, and it didn't quite work out, and the pictures didn't quite happen. And, you know, I definitely learnt an awful lot. I wouldn't be able to say why photographers feel. I understand the need as to why they feel they need to go back, because I think these conflict photographers are very confident in these sort of situations, and they're very confident of their own ability and their own skills, you know, and they know how to handle these situations, and they know what not to do, probably where not to go, more importantly than where to go and what to do, if you see what I mean. And so, yes, I do understand that maybe almost like an adrenaline need, that they need to go and they need to shoot this, but it's certainly nothing that I would feel I needed to do. I have no adrenaline rush to go and do that, but would I like to go back to the places that I've been to and see how they've changed now? Yes, absolutely. But Ukraine is, I mean, I admire those guys and women that want to go out and do that sort of stuff. It's and the stuff that they shoot is pretty impressive, bearing in mind the situation they're having to work in, you know.
Talking of situations, and as you said, being parachuted in as an agency photographer. It was a similar story, wasn't it, following the tsunami? I wonder how you prepare yourself for photographing that kind of devastation and making sure that, we've talked about this before on the show a lot, preserving dignity, and because these are people's lives that you're photographing.
There is, especially with the tsunami, I was the on-call photographer in London that day, and they called me and they said, turn on the TV, and I did, and I saw what was happening, and that was it. I was on the next flight out to Sri Lanka. Nothing prepares you for what I witnessed in Sri Lanka. I landed, and before I got to the office, the first thing I saw was the newspaper with Arko Datta's image of the woman crying on the beach with the hand that won the World Press Photo. And I just remember looking at that image and gone, well, that's a hell of an image, and I'll be lucky to get anything anywhere near as good as that. So, in one way it's a relief. You go, Arko's done it. This is an incredible image, and so now I'm not looking for those standalone images. I'm trying to look for those sort of stories. Incidentally, that's where so I managed to get out onto the west or the east coast, I think, then it flooded again, so it took me a week to get out there. The country flooded and no one could get in. So I was the only photographer working that coast. So every day I just got up and I had all these different stories. I ended up doing various different stories out while I was out there. And I remember going to a beach one morning to do a story on fishermen again, and I bumped into Tom Stoddard. And Tom said, Kieran, he said, wow, he said, he just got in. He just got into the East Coast. He just got over the floods, and he was working for an NGO at the time. And he said, I've been seeing this stuff you've been shooting. He said, where did you get that from? And I said, oh, come with me. And so I took him to this place on the coast where I think the story that we'd found was that the wave had come in and it had buried the living and unearthed the dead. Oh. And it was so all the freshly coffins were being upended, and so it was this bizarre scenario, very eerie, very chilling. And you walk onto a beach and it was just littered with buried crosses and coffins and stuff like this. And I didn't see Tom again, but I was able to sort of take him to this. But having spent a week or 10 days out there, I sort of knew the lie of the land. But again, nothing prepares you. People come to you and say, with their papers and their passport, and they see this person in me and they go, can you help me? And they're the lowest moments, because there's nothing you can do. You know that you don't have it in your capacity to be able to help give these people the help that they need. And you feel guilty going in there. And they rebuild. They start rebuilding the next day. I came back from that trip probably more affected than anything else that I've done in my career. And I didn't realise it at the time.
Actually, the word you used, guilty, reminds me of a conversation I had with the Irish photojournalist Cahill McNaughton, who was talking about the guilt. I'm sure it was Cahill that was talking about the guilt that he felt when he was in the migrant camps in places like Africa, and he would talk about 1 minute being in a hotel and the next minute photographing what you wouldn't wish on on anybody, and he felt a real guilt about that.
I think the biggest, and I totally understand it. I think the other time that really hit me was I was in South Sudan, and it was during the Civil War, and we were on a camp that was protecting one tribe from the other. And it was a UN camp, and the conditions were appalling, and the amount of people that were living in what was the equivalent of 3 or 4 sides of football pitches was, there was nearly 15 to 20,000 people living in these, and it was the conditions were appalling. And you approach the elder and you ask for permission to be able to come into the camp, to be able to take pictures, and once you have his blessing, and he understand, and they were very, very wary of the media parachuting in, getting what they needed and leaving, and totally at the cost of the these tribes that were living in these conditions. But I think we were there for maybe a week, so we spent an awful lot of time with them, and we had the blessing of this elder, and I remember leaving because we were crashing in tents on the same piece of land, and I remember thinking, I'm getting on my flight tomorrow, or I'm flying back to Juba to get on my international flight to fly home, and that's when it hit me, and I just thought, I cannot believe that I'm able to leave these people and get on a plane and fly home, and I'll have running water, I'll have electricity, I won't be running in fear of my life. That's really tough.
How do you reconcile then how do you restore, if you like, friendly relationships between you and, if you like, normal life when you do return, when you come home to the UK and you're doing the normal sort of banal jobs, paying the bills, cutting the grass, listening to people complain that jelly babies are 50 pence more expensive these days?
There's a lot of you that sort of, especially after 2005, the tsunami, you tend to sort of get really angry when you hear people moaning about the smallest things.
Do you vocalise it? Have you had to stop yourself saying, listen, this is what's really going on in the world?
When you get back from, when I go back from the tsunami, my Tia had the 3 kids, and I probably should have gone and talked to somebody, but I didn't, because I'd lost the number my boss gave me, which was part of his job, and I didn't want to ask him for the number, because then he would know I needed to talk to somebody, and I didn't want him to know that I needed to talk to somebody, so I just ended up unloading it all on Tia, who was there with three children, and the nightmares following that, and so I probably should have gone to. It's probably taken since then to sort of whittle it out of my system. I was once asked to tell a story about what happened. There was one particular story in the tsunami, and I was shooting with the BBC in Dubai at the time, and the producer had sort of said around the table, "Oh, Kieran, tell that story about what happened." And so I did, and they were like, they were, "Oh gosh, I can't believe that happened. Wow, that's incredible." And at the end, the producer came up, he said, "I'm really sorry that I asked you to repeat that story." He said, "Because as you were telling it," he said, "I could see it was just, part of you was just draining away." And he said, "I really apologise for," and I hadn't even noticed. I hadn't even noticed. But these stories, I had to go back to my old school, and they wanted to know about my career, and I did the prize night, and I brought a couple of stories up. And these are the stories that really resonate with people. So, they're very personal to me, and I'm not talking about a photograph I've taken. I'm talking about an experience I've had. And so I'm standing there as a photographer, not saying, "Look at this picture, does it say anything to you? Are you learning anything from it?" I'm actually talking to them, saying, "This is what I went through." While the photography was almost an aside to the whole thing, Yeah.
Can we head through this gate here?
Yeah.
Don't lose your train of thought. There we go. So so you're in the school.
Yeah, and you suddenly realise that all the youngsters that are just doing their O's and A levels and receiving their prizes that night, they want to come and talk to you about this story, which is your personal experience and not actually a photograph that you've taken.
Do you mind me asking you if you ever have received counselling or felt the necessity post that to talk with anybody?
No, I did. In the end, I didn't. I mean, it took years before I realised that I should have. And how, I used to come back. I used to do a lot of work in Africa, and I would come back, and the kids would leave food on their plate, and it would just drive me bonkers. I said, "Don't you understand? I've just been with kids that this age, and they don't have anything." And of course, my kids didn't understand that. But I found that I did find myself very aware of not having to vocalize it so much in front of family. So you would have to sort of take it in and turn away and think, "Yeah, really, I really need to talk to somebody about this." But no, in the end, I didn't. I mean, I had a very Tia's a pretty amazing woman, and she's the sort of wife that understood what the job entailed, and she understood, like going to Iraq or going to the tsunami. She said, "This is your job." I come home and go, they want to go to Iraq, to Baghdad, and she'll be like, "Well, it's your job, isn't it?" And I go, "Yeah, thanks, it is." And it was almost like she was giving you her blessing, but she would never ever say, "Don't do that, don't do this, don't do that." Probably then she'd have to deal with the fallout when you come back from these situations, you know. And I've done a lot of situations like that since then, not working for Reuters, but working for other companies, where I think the experience at Reuters has prepared you more for seeing these situations. And I've worked with people that have been in these situations with me that have literally fallen apart. Other journalists that have fallen apart, you know, and maybe your experience as having seen this and that maybe 5 or 6 years earlier has allowed you to sort of get through it and look after them. But I don't know whether I'll spend the rest of my life working out of my system. Who knows? I think I'm okay.
One of the benefits of the wire service, and you talk about this yourself on the website actually, extolling the benefits of having been to where you've been and had access to what you've had access to, is you've enjoyed a reasonable amount of success with awards and also exhibitions around the world, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, following on from what I was talking about in South Sudan, you know, you asked me, how do you integrate when you come back? Well, I came back from South Sudan and I was my next gig was Wimbledon.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, there is absolutely no way I want to go to Wimbledon. And I was going in on my own to shoot my own story. I just can't be bothered going and watching people sit and sip champagne and eat strawberries and cream, not after where I've just been. I just was not interested at all. But as it got nearer the time, you know, I think Tia said to me, you know, actually, it could be good for you to just go and spend a couple of weeks just shooting fluff, you know, at Wimbledon. And so I did. And I went and I spent, I don't know, I was there maybe 4 or 5 days just walking around with, I think, just one camera and watching all my colleagues sweat it out on the courts. And I'm thinking, I know how that feels. I've been there, I've done that.
Yeah.
And I was just floating around, spent a lot of time in the cafe, and I ended up shooting these pictures. And the next thing I know, World Press Photo.
Well, these are pictures that if it's the Wimbledon story I'm thinking of, this is the one where you've got people holding their young kids aloft to look into the part of Wimbledon they're not allowed to see because they're on the outside courts.
That's right. So
it's a particular ticket that you and your father had, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, we went in the day when you turned up at the gate and somebody leaving one of the show courts handed you a ticket, and you were able to go in and you could wander around all the outside courts, but you couldn't get into the inside courts. No. And so my whole basis of the story I wanted to shoot was I wanted to show what it was like to not have a show court ticket, because I wasn't interested in shooting any tennis. I just wasn't interested at all. But I just wanted to experience what it was like outside, because I'd had those experiences as a 10-year-old. And there's one image, I think it's the lead image on the set, which is just a picture of a tennis ball sitting above, you know, about 6 feet above a fence. And that's an image. So when I was there with my father, we were standing at the main gate watching one of the players, I think it might have been John McEnroe, coming out, and this ball just came over the back of the court and just bounced into my lap. And my dad just said, put it in your pocket. And so I did. In it went. I thought,
you still got that ball?
No, because why? Because a ball boy came running out.
Oh no!
And because they obviously need to keep 8 balls in the flow of the of a match or a couple of games or whatever. So the ball boy came running out, and there was only me and my dad standing there, and he was like, well, tennis ball came out. Where's the tennis ball? Where's the tennis ball? And I wasn't saying anything, and my dad wasn't saying anything, and he said, it must be here, and I went, oh, you mean this?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, I just, pulled it out of my pocket. He went, yes, grabbed it off me and ran back in.
Oh.
So that lead image is that memory I have, turning around and seeing that ball just in the air, and that's actually one image I spent a lot of time standing there trying to get that picture, and it took me 2 or 3 days to work out. I thought I was a quick learner, but obviously I'm not. But it took me 2 or 3 days to work out how to get that shot.
Did it help you mentally, returning from
it did.
Sudan and then being in this story, which you'd effectively been able to choose the story you wanted to tell?
Totally. I mean, Bob Martin, who runs Wimbledon, the sports photographer, great man. He had said, Kieran, I had a sponsorship from a German magazine. He said, come in and shoot whatever you want to shoot, it's fine. So again, I had carte blanche, and I remember going to Amsterdam to the World Press and speaking to a lot of other editors there who were talking about commissioning me for stuff, and I remember just saying, listen, I really don't work well under a commission. I said, if you want the best out of me, you've really just got to give me this sort of general broad strokes, and I will go, and they were like, no, I don't.
Did they think of you as a maverick, or?
They just thought, not sure if we can, that's not how we work, certainly not in Germany. That's not how we work. And so I probably blew maybe a couple of commissions from that because I just thought there's no way I would have shot those pictures if somebody had been looking over my shoulder every night, editing my stuff, going, can you maybe try and get this to me? Nah, because I didn't know what I was going to be shooting, and I only knew when I saw it. And then I put the story together at the end, and so I suddenly realized, yes, that's what I needed to be able to work on your own under no parameters. No one's judging, no one's saying anything, and you just produce this body of work at the end of it. And then it's a real, true body of work, from inside.
A lot of photojournalists have been saying to me of late that they would rather have the financial stress, I'll use the S word, of funding their own story and then trying to sell it in than being given commissions, and that sounds like a way that you'd prefer to work.
Oh, well, without question. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being a freelance photojournalist is, there's always going to be financial stress.
Yes.
You didn't enter this line of work for the money, and so, unless you can produce the work that you want to produce, there's actually no point. So, I may as well just go and stack shelves in a supermarket somewhere if I want to, be able to pay them. That's not to say that, occasionally it would be nice not to have the financial stress. But I've been a freelancer since 1993, except with the exception of between 2000 and 2008 when I was staff at Reuters. And I took that job because of the security with a really young family and everything that came with it. But by 2008, I was just so disillusioned with where I was as a photographer. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had the best gig in the world at Reuters, and they were brilliant to me, and they gave me whatever I wanted to do. They let me do it. They go, Kieran, okay, you can go and do this.
You were described as a specialist photographer.
Yeah, they had that was a new thing at the time. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what specialist meant, but we sort of all saw it and went, do you know what, okay, yeah, I'm one of those, having no idea what it meant. But it didn't mean that we specialised in anything. But maybe we specialised in being able to do what we wanted to do. But that was the thing that working at Reuters, working all those photographers from, there was a fantastic group of photographers that I was working with when I first started. Very, very talented. Who just kept pushing. And those were the days where if you weren't good enough, you were out, as I can attest to. But that was sort of integral in my makeup and my foundation as a photographer, and then working with all these great photographers like Jerry Lampen and Yanni Barakis and Goran, all these guys that would come in, you would meet on big shoots, just soak up all the energy from them and all the experience that they had. But by 2008, I realised I was like a mouse on a wheel. Right. I was just doing the same thing, and as a photographer, I just wasn't improving. And so I knew what was happening. And I knew that I had a great gig and I was always shooting these great stories. But as a photographer, I was going nowhere. I was doing what was required. And that's there's no disrespect there to, any of the Reuters photographers. But it was a very personal thing for me that I just thought, do you know what? I really want to be doing something else, and I really want to be testing myself in another arena. And I made that decision, which didn't go down well at the time, to sort of with my bosses at Reuters. They could not understand what I was doing, but it was that need to be able to try and express myself in another arena, And I mean, those guys now are still. That's incredible. I've never seen that before. I've absolutely no idea
what is this? Yeah, we just hold on to those thoughts. If I was walking along a canal side, I'd say this was something like a pillbox, but it's not that, is it?
No.
It's it looks like some sort of sentry. Hang on, I feel like we're on a Photowalk. I should get a picture of it. But what is this?
That's some serious reinforced concrete, isn't it?
is.
And it's had a few cows in there as well.
How does a cow get into this? There's a door that would have been on it. There's a ladder to the top. Well, I feel I need to get a portrait of you up the top. Oh, don't damage yourself, Kieran.
Okay.
You've been to all these war-torn places and I'm going to damage you in Farnborough. Let me get a portrait of you sat atop. Look like the king of the castle. Here we go. Can you see the shard? If you're listening to this, which you are, but by virtue of the fact you're listening to the podcast, Kieran's pointing toward London from the top of his lookout point. You've never found this before. Come down that carefully, please. This is how your cameras get damaged.
Yeah, I know. Throw them around. It's just like, get up there. But they're built to last.
Yeah. Well, no, where were we? We were talking about when you left. Well, that looks like a climber's route down there. Maybe we'll go the other way. So they couldn't understand you at
Yes, they did think, and to be honest, I could understand why they thought it was a bazaar, because you're at the top of your game and you've got all these opportunities and you're working with all these brilliant photographers and you're doing all these amazing jobs. World Cups. Yeah, I mean everything. Football World Cups, Rugby World Cups, Test cricket. All these, so...
And the depth of the stories. I mean, yes, on top of the sporting events, I know they're hideous to witness, but the tsunami, Iraq and various other world events that you've attended.
Yeah, they're just sort of
your
these...
ticket to these events.
Yeah, totally, and you feel incredibly privileged, and you're giving up. I was giving all this up to try and rediscover myself as a photographer, which, I mean, it doesn't make any... Actually, as I say it now, it still doesn't make any sense, but I sort of deep down knew what I was trying to do, and it was only after I left that I was able to sort of... what's the word? I vindicated myself.
Right.
When I realised, yes, this is why I did it. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could, instead of maybe, to use that expression again, parachuting into situations, reacting very quickly and pulling them out, which is a skill set that all photojournalists have. And, I wanted to be able to go somewhere and stay longer.
Yeah.
I just, the idea of just spending a little bit more time, so, this is really interesting. I just thought you can get more out of me if I can do that. And I realised you don't have that luxury when you're working for an agency. I mean, you just don't have that luxury. And they don't have the luxury to be able to. And to be fair to Reuters, they gave me everything that I wanted to do. And it's not that it wasn't enough. It's just I just needed to go in a different direction. And interestingly, it was going to Wootton Bassett on a shift for Reuters, because they were still using me to do local stuff. And Wootton, it's not local, but it's about an hour from here, but basically it was going there for the first time and shooting that story that really opened up my eyes to something that I could shoot here that would have a lot more meaning than maybe just coming down every 2 weeks and shooting a couple of pictures. I was just looking for something a little bit different there.
So in that we have an international audience, Wootton Bassett, I would imagine, made news bulletins around the world. I have no doubt about that, the images of Wootton. But I feel we should probably fill in the gaps here, photographing this unique town at such a sad time.
Yes, very much so. And that was evident from the very first time I visited it in 2009, I think. And it had actually been happening before I went, but I sort of arrived and, they'd called me at the last minute. I was late, and the situation is when you drive down there are very few parking spots, but if you miss the turning into the car park as you enter Wootton, you've actually got to drive down the high street, do a 3-point turn and come back. And as I did this, both sides of the street were already lined, as if the arrival of the cortege was imminent.
So this was repatriation for the troops that had lost their lives.
Troops that lost their lives in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And they were being brought through Wootton Bassett on their way to the coroner.
Yeah.
And it was all because RAF Lynham had shut down for works that they had to
so
change.
It would have otherwise been at Lynham.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. there was no sound. It was just utter silence. I remember getting out of my car. And what I was very conscious of at the time was the clattering of photographers' ladders on one side of the street. And when that bell tolled, which meant the cortege was about to arrive, you could hear a pin drop, and then a photographer's ladder clatter, and then you heard shutters going off, and it was, one of those moments you thought, wow, okay, I mean, there are families on the other side. The ladders were so that you could get over the hearse to be able to photograph the families' reactions. Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time I was there, one of the locals sort of turned around and said to the photographer, one of the photographers there, take your hat off when the cortege comes through. And the photographer's like, I'm here to work. I don't need to take my hat off. And the old boy was saying, but it's just a sign of respect. Just take. And I just thought, listen, I don't know what the point is in antagonizing locals here. This is their town. They're standing here, and the old boy was absolutely right, So I just thought, this could be a very delicate situation, and that was my first experience of Wootton. And I ended up shooting a picture of a very young girl just holding some roses. It was just a bunch of roses.
And I've seen it. Yeah, it's a very potent picture.
And I shot that picture, and I thought, you know what? Maybe this is really interesting, because when the cortege moved on, the sort of street just sort of came alive again. And there was noise and hustle and bustle.
So it all went back to normal.
And it very, very quickly went back to normal. And standard bearers packed up their standards, and they went, and everybody moved into the car parks, and people started chatting. And so I went down again, only was there very early. I thought, I wonder what the street's like before, because I'd only ever experienced it literally as the cortege was about to arrive. And I realised it was almost like it was almost like a party atmosphere. Really? So people were down there, and they were meeting people they hadn't seen in an awful long time, and there were people in the pub, and they were having a drink, and just the normal things that people do when they get together. There was just, and then the families would come and join later, but it was very, very different to the moment when the bells tolled. And I thought, right, this is what I want to try and capture. I want to capture the human side to this, so it's not necessarily always about the hearses and the soldiers and the sadness about it. There were so many elements to that story that I wanted to capture, and so I realized that I couldn't really, I started shooting it on film. So I'd go down, I wasn't assigned, I'd go down and I'd shoot it on film because it was the quietest camera I had.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so I'm just standing there just going click, moving around. I moved to the other side.
One of your M6s?
Yes,
yeah.
These two M6s, and I moved to the other side of the street, which really was just for sort of relations and family. The press normally stayed on one side of the street and family on the other. And I sort of moved over there, and I started shooting in, really sort of quiet moments over there. Yeah. And it's not easy, goodness me. It's, to bring your camera to your eye in a moment when everybody is still, and, soldiers are saluting, and it's, you almost have to, you either have to, I'm going to go for this, or I'm not going to go for it. But you realise then that no one is looking at you. Yeah. And therefore, so I began to sort of try to capture these moments that I didn't think you would necessarily be able to see, if I was standing on a set of ladders shooting. And then Reuters would ask me to go down again, and I would shoot stuff for them, and then I would shoot stuff for myself. But there were just some, unbelievable moments down there that when I finished, after, I think it was about 18 months or 2 years, I went down and I'd done every repatriation. Everyone since when I first went. Right. I followed every single one. And you're in a situation where you're at home when you hear that a soldier has died, and you think, okay, that means I'm going to Wootton Bassett again. There's that really bizarre juxtaposition of being in, soldiers have died, therefore I can go and continue my story. That was really hard to sort of try and sort of balance yourself with. So when I finished, on the day that it was turned into Royal Wootton Bassett, I printed up all the images, and a bank on the high street said I could use their glass windows as an exhibition space. So I just printed everything up on a canvas, put them all into the walls of this glass front, and all the locals started looking at it. And what was fantastic was that, so they would come and go, I have a picture of a young kid sitting in a Chelsea shirt on the side of the street. You know, the father came and said, that's my son. Can I have that? And I said, sure. And every canvas got given away.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, so the pub with all the soldiers standing, saluting outside it. Yeah. She took that. The old lady that was standing in the window with the dog, you know, that family took that, and all the prints went, you know, and it was the locals. And it was the locals' way of saying, we like what we see.
Yeah.
So it was like a big relief for me to think that they, you know, I had their blessing on it. I hadn't come down and trampled all over everything to get what I wanted. And as a result of that, I ended up going back to judge, I think, 4 photography competitions for the local comprehensive down there. So they'd invite me back once a year to, you know. So in a way, I felt really relieved that I'd shot the story, I'd got what I wanted and I needed out of it, and what also the locals wanted and needed out of it, more importantly. And then I just fought for 3 years to find a home for it. And eventually the Imperial War Museum took them. So that then was, I thought, finally I've got the 50 images, they've got a home. Yeah. And if anyone wants to see them at some point when they get them into their back catalogue, they'll be there to be seen and looked at and studied. Amazing. You know. Yeah, absolutely.
And my thanks to Kieran Doherty for walking with me and telling his story, his stories of life on the Photowalk. And that's part 1 of my conversation with Kieran, as we walked for quite a few hours and then some. But there's a very important story to come, which I'll tell you about in a moment, which will be mixed into the Photowalk in 2 weeks' time when we return on the 19th of August together. A show that has Kieran, yes, part 2, but also a return to the letters that you've been sending in. And they are a very important part of this show, always. So please keep sending in your stories of life, as we say. And they don't have to be stories about photography. I mean, they are stories of life, but they're seen through your lens. And that's really important. If you're sending pictures in, 2,000 pixels wide, please, or if you're making them on smartphones, then send them best quality and send them to the studio address, which is studio@photographydaily.show. studio@photographydaily.show. I will tell you what's on the More edition in a moment, because More continues over the next couple of weeks, as does for our wonderful supporters. And thank you so much for your support. If you're a Patreon member, we have the unplugged interview shows going out midweek as well, called Replay. We have our play out song, as always, and this week it's an artist that I featured before, but I think it's a very fitting play-out song from Andrew Word called Between the Days. It is a fond favourite of mine, this particular song or record. You know I like my analogue speak. There are lines in it such as, oh, it's never far, there's nothing you should fear at all, though the way is hard. Words like that are so applicable to many of the stories that I tell from your letters, and certainly applicable to the stories that Kieran was telling today within our conversation as we walked. And we have a postscript. Today I've taken it from, now don't look at me weirdly, I know you're about to. I've taken it from the restroom wall from the coffee shop where I met with Kieran. I know it seems a little strange, but knowing the stories that we were likely to talk about as we were about to head out on the walk, and then finding out that Kieran had this incredible calm nature about his stories as we walked, I'm pleased that I photographed some framed words of a piece called, well, I hope I pronounce this correctly, Desiderata, which is a poem that's, well, it's unattributed, but it's largely about letting go of the things that we desire, finding the things that are important. And I'll read you just the first few lines because I think they match some of the topics of today very well. And they certainly would again when I talk in the second part, accompanied by your letters, in a couple of weeks' time when I speak next with Kieran. But the words that I'd like to leave you with as today's postscript: go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible, without surrender, Be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others, even to the dull and to the ignorant, because they too have their story.
See the light stars, hear the sound of the unseen in the empty fall, in the silence listen, may it lift your heart and move your feet to run again. May you wander far, you will not be lost within. And you'll see the light, though the darkness seems so strong. In the deepest night, let love lead you home. Come and rest your head. Here time is an ocean. There is peace and grace. Mercy's born between the days. And you'll see the the darkness seems so strong. In the deepest night, let love lead you home. And you'll see the light, though the darkness seems so strong. In the deepest night, let love lead you home. Let love lead you home.
Word and Between the Days, and that's it for this week, and that's it for a couple of weeks. My thanks to Kieran Doherty, mpb.com. The Hall of Kit Fame link, by the way, will be on the show page today, or you can go direct by visiting photo and video kit halloffame.com. photographydaily.com. And also my thanks to those who are patrons, which you can join through the link on the website photographydaily.show. And for those wonderful supporters who are, tomorrow is The More Show. It's your own weekend oasis of a little extra for your kind support. And we're going to be talking about kit. Well, sort of. I can't believe a guest at a wedding practically wrestled me to the floor to try and work out how I'm working and what I'm working with. And I'll have an addendum to the subject of luck, helped by today's guest, Kieran Doherty. Now, the Monday assignment shows continue, though, as I say, the Photowalk returns on the 19th in 2 weeks' time, where Kieran will be sharing a very personal story, which started in lockdown but continues. A story about his mother, his father, his home, and his feelings about family.
Even in my own home that I sort of grew up in as a kid, I'm still now trying to figure out places where I should leave my cameras so that if something happens, I can grab it and I can take a picture.
It's such a strong second part, with other stories to come too from him, that I'm hoping you'll join me and Kieran. Music on the show today from the wonderful artlist.io. Links and further research to what you've heard and who we've talked about will be on the show page today. And my thanks to Emily Renier and Andrea Gilpin and Neil Ford for your work behind the scenes. I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you next time.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.